Despite being a 10-year-old game, many weapons found in Skyrim are still unknown amongst the player base. Even the most veteran of players decide to opt for the standard Dragonbone and Daedric weapons. But in today's video, I hope to fix that by showing you 10 secret and unique weapons you may have missed in Skyrim. Number 1. Bloodskull Blade. You know what's cooler than a giant red greatsword? A giant red greatsword that shoots lasers out of itself. That's what the people of Bethesda probably said when they made the Bloodskull Blade. Found during the quest The Final Descent, the Dragonborn will have to make their way down into the shut-down mine in Raven Rock to find the remains of Gratian Cerelius. Yes, that Gratian from Morrowind. Nevertheless, you can find the sword lying next to his remains with its glowing red hue. But its colors aren't what make it so special. Power attacking with the Bloodskull Blade will shoot out a blast of red energy towards your enemies. This ability isn't all that powerful, but it does stagger your enemies, allowing you to easily close the gap. It's an excellent weapon for two-handed builds, and a perfect trophy room centerpiece for everyone else. Number 2. Headsman's Axe. Ever walk into Solitude and think to yourself, man, that axe that just chopped off that guy's head looks pretty cool? If so, then you'll be happy to know that you can actually add this weapon to your collection. In the Castle Dower dungeon, you'll find Atar, the headman of Solitude, who's also the guy that killed Rogvir when you first enter the city. Completing the quest for him will let him become a follower. From there, owning the headsman's axe is as easy as taking it from Atar's inventory. You can also just kill Atar and take it off his corpse too, if you're not a fan of the Imperials. Although the headsman's axe doesn't have any enchantments, it's still quite unique in that it's the longest reaching weapon in the game. So you won't have to get up close and personal when wielding this battle axe. It also has around half the weight, which is typical of other battle axes. And although the lack of enchantments is a letdown, it also means you can enchant it yourself with whatever you like, potentially turning this into one of the most powerful weapons in the game. Number 3. Windshear. The Windshear has been constantly regarded as the best sword you can have for legendary difficulty, and that's thanks to its downright overpowered enchantment. But obtaining the sword is no easy task, and many of you will have to make a new save file to find it. This is because Windshear can only be obtained during the quest Hail Sithis. While on the Emperor's ship, go to the bowsprit of the vessel, and you'll find the Windshear at the very top. And it makes sense why Bethesda made the window to wield this weapon so small, as the sword can make the game so easy, it stops being fun. This is thanks to its enchantment, which has a very high chance of staggering enemies when they're struck with the sword, making enemies unable to move or attack you. Many players simply keep this weapon in their offhand and use a stronger weapon in the main hand, and watch as the infamous legendary difficulty turns into child's play. Number 4. Bolar's Oathblade. Another weapon that many people miss the chance to collect is Bolar's Oathblade, an Akaviri sword that, much like Windshear, has a very small window to obtain. But unlike Windshear, this sword is far less popular in the Skyrim community, making it a far rarer item to have. To find it, you'll have to go to Bloated Man's Grotto, but only before you begin the quest Ill Met by Moonlight. Otherwise, the layout of the grotto will be altered and block you from reaching the sword. The only hope of acquiring the sword then is by killing Sinding during the quest and waiting an in-game month for the cell to reset to its original layout. The blade itself does 25 points of stamina damage and inflicts 12 points of fear for 30 seconds. These enchantments are nothing extraordinary, but the fact that so few players have obtained this weapon is a good enough reason to add it to your collection. It's also got a pretty cool backstory, as it once belonged to a blade warrior who was tracked down and killed by Thalmor agents. So, it'll be the perfect weapon the next time you want to hunt down some Thalmor bootlickers. Number 5. The Keening. The Keening is not only arguably the best dagger in Skyrim, but it also has a very rich lore and history that turns this dagger into one of the best we've ever seen in an Elder Scrolls game. The dagger can be found during the quest Arniel's Endeavor, where you and Arniel go on a, endeavor to uncover the mystery behind the disappearance of the Dwemer race. What this boils down to, however, is one of the most tedious quests in the game, as Arniel's Endeavor feels like 4 fetch quests combined into one. Nevertheless, the quest does have a satisfying ending, and you get to keep the Keening at the end of it. And when I say this dagger is one of the best in the game, I'm not kidding. It has a base damage of 8, putting it on the higher end of the dagger damage spectrum. But more importantly, it has an enchantment that absorbs 10 points of health, stamina, and magicka all at once. Not only does this cause the enemy to light up like a rainbow when struck, but it makes for a perfect weapon for battle mage builds, who can use the weapon as a way to drain the stamina and magicka of enemies. The lore behind this weapon is also pretty interesting. The weapon was created by the chief tonal architect of the Dwemer, Lord Kangranak, and created as a tool to access the heart of Lorkhan, and was later used by the player character in Morrowind. Number 6. The Dwarven Black Bow of Fate. If you stealth archers out there thought you were going to be left out, then look no further than the Dwarven Black Bow of Fate. This unique weapon is one of the hardest of its kind to come by, requiring you to complete several puzzles to obtain it. The bow is found in the Dwemer ruins of Kagramez and Solstheim. These ruins are pretty unique, as you're going to have to go through a gauntlet of trials before you can escape. These trials will include fighting dwarven spiders in an arena and avoiding electrified water puddles. But once you get through the trials, you'll be rewarded with the reward room, and at the center, you should see the Black Bow of Fate. Not only does this bow have a pretty useful power of having a 50% chance of absorbing 25 points for each attribute, but it's also a unique weapon that actually looks unique. Although the design is identical to the dwarven bow, it's both thinner and has a completely different color scheme. What's even cooler is that the back has a unique glowing effect that you can see in darker areas, and a purple opal-like color that looks like a Doppler straight out of Counter-Strike. So if you're looking for a weapon that actually lives up to its unique status, then check out the Black Bow of Fate. Number 7. Soul Render and Blood Scythe. I know I'm cheating a little by including 2 weapons in a single entry, but the Soul Render and Blood Scythe are really 2 parts of a whole. You can find these 2 scimitars during the quest Deathbrand. In it, the Dragonborn searches for the lost pirate treasure of Harkin Deathbrand. The quest culminates with you battling out the ghost of Harkin along with his crew, and upon defeating them, you'll be able to wield both the Soul Render and the Blood Scythe. Alone, these swords are pretty unremarkable, but when dual-wielded, they're one of the best weapon combinations in the game. Together, they absorb 15 points to health and magicka, making you a mage's worst nightmare. And for everyone else, the combined damage of the 2 weapons will make quick work of anyone that gets in your way. Number 8. The Ghost Blade. If physical blades aren't really your style, then why not opt for a spectral blade that's completely transparent? Well, look no further than the Ghost Blade. This weapon can be found in the Nordic ruins of Anzilvund, and despite the entrance being pretty unassuming, you should prepare yourself for one of the more complex dungeons in the game. Inside, you'll find a necromancer named Luar Alskaven, disturbing the Nord's final resting place. You later find out that she's doing this to find a suitable body to be used as a vessel for a deceased husband. Once you go through the puzzles and traps and kill Luar, you'll be rewarded with the Ghost Blade. The base damage of this sword is nothing to write home about, but it does get points for being the lightest sword in the game, with a weight of only 1. This also means that power attacks will use much less stamina, and this in tandem with an enchantment that does an extra 3 points of damage makes it a pretty formidable sword for the early game. But I wouldn't recommend placing this sword in a display case or a weapon rack, as this sword has a habit of suddenly disappearing, which is fitting, considering it's a ghost sword. Number 9. Hoarfrost. Although most of these weapons' main purpose is to relieve people of their limbs, Hoarfrost was not made for combat, as it's a pickaxe. Just southeast of Raven Rock, you'll find the Kolbjorn Barrow and meet the dumber miner Rayla Sedaris, who will begin the quest Unearthed. The quest starts off innocent enough, with you helping this miner build an excavation site to find some treasure, but make sure you have some spare gold lying around, as Raylis' little treasure hunt will set you back a total of 11,000 gold. However, upon completion of the quest, you'll unlock Raylis as a follower and take the Hoarfrost from his inventory. But if that sounds too expensive, then you can always just kill him and be done with it. Regardless of how you go about getting it, the Hoarfrost is a pretty interesting pickaxe. It has 12 points of damage and an enchantment that dishes out frost damage, as well as being able to freeze your enemies solid. And finally, number 10. Master Sword. Yes, that Master Sword. No, this is not a mod. Bethesda has included a fully rendered Master Sword from The Legend of Zelda, along with a tunic and chest to celebrate Skyrim's release on the Nintendo Switch. But obtaining this is a little more work than just booting up the game and finding it in your inventory. To wield the Master Sword, you'll have to do one of 2 things. Firstly, you can unlock it pretty quickly if you have some Zelda amiibos lying around. Simply connect the amiibo to your Switch, use the amiibo power in Skyrim, and a special chest will spawn on the ground in front of you. This'll have some Zelda goodies, which may or may not include the Master Sword. However, if you don't have any amiibos, then you'll have to climb the summit of the Throat of the World and find a chest with all of the Zelda items that were added. Sadly, there are no enchantments on this thing, but with a base damage of 18, the highest of any one-handed sword in the game, it has the potential to become the best weapon in your inventory. And on top of this, you get to wield a weapon from one of the most iconic Nintendo franchises in gaming history without the use of any mods. How many people can say that?
Subscribe to Fall Damage, you milk drinker.